Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. All right, now you may be wondering, why am I looking at a whiteboard full of writing? Today I'm going to be talking about how I do my provider classes. This is going to be like the storyboard for the slides that I'm doing for this week's class. So this is just going to be a refresher because I've seen some of my providers and then some of the new ones that I haven't had a chance to work with. I've seen them sort of backslide a little bit. So these are some of the things that I have seen as of late that they need to sort of work on. But each one of these, and yes, I know, before I get all the comments about your lines are crooked, I know, okay? But this is just what I wanted to write down real quick so that way you guys can get a good idea of what goes into the planning stages when I'm doing a class. So again, for my slides that I'm going to be preparing, if you notice, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 13. I've got 13 on this deck, okay? And I'm going to go over each one of them all together. And it's going to be dressed up real pretty later on. But again, this is just the outline of what I'm going to do. So I always start off by the first topic sheet is going to be the title. And since this is a refresher, that's what this is. And then the table of contents. All of these that are listed here are going to be on this sheet here in the table of contents. So that way it's outlined, and if they want to just jump right into something, they can. Okay, the first one is do not change the quantity of procedures. I have seen them try to do this. Every facility's electronic medical record is different. So sometimes when a provider has to select their own codes, sometimes they will select a procedure quantity on that procedure. If the quantity is already included in the code itself, the quantity does not have to be changed. For example, if they're doing a toenail removal, they have, a certain amount. I think it's 1 to 4 nails removed. And then the other one is 5 or more, or maybe 1 to 3. I'm not sure. Anyway, but something like that, the quantity is already included in that. If they're burning off a lesion, it's up to 14 lesions is already in the code. You don't have to select the quantity, therefore, okay? So that's what I want to remind them of. Most are really good at this, but as I said, because I have some new providers that I have not worked with in ortho, they have to be told. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music. And also, what ends up happening is that it triggers an error in the system, at least for us on our side for coding. It will trigger an error. So just to sort of mitigate some of those errors, we need to work on that. So that's that one. The next one is no modifiers on PRP. So they do platelet-rich procedures, right? And this is a Category 3 code. And because it is a Category 3 code, they have their own modifiers on Category 3. But with PRP, you don't put any modifiers on it, okay? And I keep having to tell them, do not put a 50 modifier on this because PRP can only be reported one time. It does not matter how many times it is performed on the patient on that day. That's just the way it is. So again, it's triggering errors for me. So to keep all of the extra emails from my boss, Bleu, there's errors here. To keep her from having to constantly email me, I'm telling them now, do not put modifiers on PRP. The next one is, in the post-op global, use 99024. Some are forgetting to do this, and they are just not selecting anything. So it makes it very difficult when I have to keep going back and reminding them. So again, this is just a reminder for them to do this, okay? And something else I should have mentioned before I go on, I have my providers read all of these slides to me. That's the way I structure all of my classes, because I already know what I've said on these slide decks. They're the ones who need to read it and know and show that they understand what's going on. So this is why I always insist that they read it to me, because it does help to get those questions out, and then it helps other people to pay attention as well. Okay, and then the next slide is injuries are coded as injuries even in the post-op. If I haven't had a chance to work with a provider, it is almost a natural habit for them to want to code it as orthopedic aftercare when they've done like an open reduction internal fixation of a fracture. We all know as coders that you code the injury throughout the care. So if it's a subsequent visit, you're going to code it that 7th-digit character of D, and then if it's a sequela, it's going to be an S. But for the purposes of illustration, I just want them to be reminded that injuries are coded as injuries even in the post-op. All right, next one is aftercare is only for organic conditions, which ties back into that injuries, coding injuries in the aftercare. I want them to get into the habit of thinking when they are selecting that aftercare, like orthopedic aftercare, that Z4789, that they're selecting it for an organic condition and not an injury. All right. The next one is aftercare for joint replacement is Z47.1 plus the joint code for the replaced joint. Sometimes they will only report the Z47.1, which is fine, but it just would make it much more efficient if they would remember to also code that second code. Okay, that is a directive in the book to include the replaced joint as well. Okay. The next one is fracture treatments must be documented for initial and subsequent. Sometimes they will forget to document their treatment, whether they're doing an initial closed treatment or with manipulation or with no manipulation. Sometimes they'll forget to do those documents, and I have to send it back for a query. Did you do this? And, whatever, because they'll have it written down, but not the breakdown of the procedure. So I need them to remember to always do that. And then when they're doing a cast change, same thing happens. So I need them to remember that even in the post-op, that they include this as well. So, and the next one is follow-up visits after completed or global treatments are coded with Z09 with the history of condition, the history of fracture, or a history of injury. See, there's many different history of codes, which is why I encourage all of you to check out those history codes. Z09 is a follow-up after completed treatment. So when they have gone through everything and they're just coming back and they're out of the global and they're all healed and there's no further treatment, no further workup, no nothing, and everything is great, then you're going to code the Z09 with the history of whatever condition they had that's resolved now, or if it's an injury or if it's a fracture. Or if they have an injury and a fracture, you can code both of the history codes depending on how the documentation is worded. Okay. And then we have, if time statements are used, detail must accompany. Sometimes when providers are wanting to use coding based on time, they will just select the amount of time. They'll say, I spent a total of 30 minutes with the patient. Greater than 50% of this time was spent counseling and coordinating care. And then I see nothing to go along with it. And so what ends up happening is I have to default to whatever they have documented in the record. And a lot of times it's not going to meet that code. So I always ask them to make sure that they are accompanying detail on every single time they try to get coding based on time. If they spent a lot of time talking to the patient, they don't have to give me an opus. They just need to give me a brief description of what was discussed. How did you coordinate care? What did you talk about? What were the safety measures that you went over? Or, whatever, what have you. Describing any side effects from any of the treatments that they're having, or maybe, just giving further detail about their diagnosis. There's a lot of things that can be discussed. So this is why you need a brief statement as to what was being discussed. All right. And then, of course, I have the second to the last one is questions, and I put my name, I put my phone number, and my email. This is very important, guys. Do not leave this little detail out. A lot of times, sometimes providers will space out during a class and will reach out later on. So it's very important to have all of your contact information, even though, yes, they may be able to find you in like a global Outlook. If you are using Outlook at your workplace for email, they may be able to find you that way. But it's sometimes maybe they don't have access to their email and they just want a direct, number for you or whatever. That's having that sheet of contact information is always really good. And then I always put the references, the CPT book, the ICD-10 official coding guidelines. Any sort of reference that you use is always good to just go ahead and give credit where credit is due. You add it on the last sheet for references, so that way they know where they can find additional information. Okay, so that's pretty much how it goes. I like this. I love doing classes, and for me it's a lot of fun. This is going to be one part of the class. There's going to be a second part, and I've talked about it on my Patreon channel. But for the purposes of just illustration, I'm just talking about the first part of this class. So these are just some things, and you see, this isn't going to take a lot of time to go over, but it's the questions that are asked during the class that take the time. So pacing each one of these slides is a good thing. And then, of course, opening it up for questions at the end is also a good thing. It all depends on how you want to structure your class and how you want to structure talking to your providers. The key is you want to make it as open as possible, as comfortable for them as it can possibly be, because the more that you are relaxed with them, the more they feel like they can talk to you, the better these classes will be. I wasn't always like this, obviously. This took investment. This really took like, oh gosh, I don't want to be up here floundering. Let me figure out how I can try to do this class and be as comfortable as I possibly can be. And it took time to learn these little tricks. But this is why I say, if you have these slides already done, and which of course I will be completing these slides this week, and they will be ready for Friday, so that I can just, have them printed out already. And if anything else I need to print out, I can have it printed out before then. I like to be prepared. I always bring my CPT book and my diagnosis book with me when I do classes, because inevitably you will have somebody ask, well, I heard about this code, and I heard about that code, and I heard about this guideline and that guideline, because they try to stump you. So just keep that in mind. And so you always want to be prepared. Anything else that you think, like a reference wise, that you may think you need, I would go ahead and strongly recommend that you take it with you, just so that you can be as prepared as possible. So never hurts to be prepared. And when you are prepared, it shows people that you are responsible and that you are in control of what you're doing. So this is very, very important. All right. And it gives people confidence in you that you know what you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys for being so patient on my episodes coming out. I have a few episodes, other ones that I need to work on today. I will be back for Motivation Monday, which will be on, let me put a pin in that one first. I'll be back in the morning for Motivation Monday. So that way you guys can tune in then. All right. I just have 2 ideas on Motivation Monday, and I'm trying to decide which way I want to go. That's what it is. So just so you guys know. Anyway, if you have any questions for Q&A Tuesday, I'm still stockpiling questions. I haven't really gotten a whole lot of questions from last week. I think probably because it was Valentine's Day and all that good stuff. And it's cool. I have a few topics I could talk about, but just letting you guys know that if you have any other questions, let me know. And I will go ahead and wrap this one up. But if you are a medical coder, a medical coding student, somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. I will see y'all on the next video. Bye.